Hey, fifth grade. Yesterday you talked about the triangle trade, okay? This trade between three different areas of the world: Europe, Africa, and North and South America, all right, across the Atlantic. Now, we're going to step back from that specifics of who traded what with who to look at the big picture impact of that, all right, by looking at the Columbian Exchange. Now, to review the triangle trade, Europeans took slaves from Africa to America to work on plantations. They grew raw materials like cotton and indigo. They took those raw materials to England and made manufactured goods like cloth. Cotton can be turned into cloth. Indigo is a dye. They took those raw materials and they turned them into cloth, right? Now, that cloth they then took back to Africa and they would trade it for more slaves, who they would then take to America to create more raw materials, which they would take to Europe to create more manufactured goods, and the cycle would continue. So we know who was trading what with who. Now we're going to look at why is that important by looking at the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is the exchange of goods and ideas between the New World and Old World. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably one of the most important events in history. All right. As somebody who studies history, I can't think of almost any more important. All right. So let's take a look. We have foods coming over from the New World to the Old World. We also have foods going from the Old World to the New World, but we also have some other very important things going here. All right. Livestock, cattle, sheep, pigs, horses, hugely important. All right. Horses change people's ability to move from one place to another. Cattle and oxen and things like that are not only a food source, but allow people to pull plows and farming equipment and farm better. Okay. So these are going to have a big impact. So I think that this pretty much proves that the Columbian Exchange changed the world. No, were you going to believe me? No, I have to provide evidence. You were just going to believe me, weren't you? What, is it the tie just because I wear a tie and I look official? Or is it the bookshelf full of books? Now, the bookshelf's a better reason than the tie thing, but still, I need to provide evidence to show you. So we're going to look at a couple different places, and I'll show you how it changed the world. Now, up here is a country called Ireland, all right? Now, the Irish weren't one of the people that went and discovered new places and brought a lot of these foods back and forth. But the Irish were hugely impacted still, right? So potatoes, a New World plant, came to Ireland and became one of their staple crops that people lived on, that people ate every day, all right? Ireland became more powerful and stronger because they had a healthier, bigger population of people, because they had better food, all right? Again, the Irish weren't the ones that were going back and forth across the ocean during this period, but even they were affected. The cassava root in Africa. Now, the cassava root is a root vegetable. It comes from the Americas. It was taken back to Africa, and now it's one of the most important foods in Africa. All right, this is a modern cassava market. All right, this isn't something that happened hundreds of years ago. It's still making an impact on Africa. Tomatoes in Italy. Okay, I'm getting hungry just looking at this one. Now, tomatoes, we consider that a traditional food in Italy, right? Well, 500 years ago, no one in Italy knew what a tomato was. Those came from the New World, all right? But now, again, it's a regular part of their diet. Horses in America. This is probably the way you view Native Americans, right? Riding on their horses out on the open plains, the Great Plains. Well, 500 years ago, Native Americans had never seen a horse, all right? No Native American was riding a horse. The Europeans brought those over, and it changed life for Native Americans. Cattle in America. Now, we have this idea of the cowboy, right? Kind of a symbol of America, right? The cowboy from back in the old days, and that's what America's about, right? Well, cows were never originally in America. Europeans brought them over here, okay? So this isn't something that's sort of just natural and would happen on its own. These are things that people brought these animals and these goods to these different places. Now, this document is actually our best proof that the Columbian Exchange changed the world, okay? This is a chart that shows you the populations of different continents over time. Now, we have 1,000 and 1,700. That's a big gap in years. And right in the middle of that, around 1500, the Columbian Exchange occurred, about 500 years ago. Now, we can look at the difference between the population here and here to see what kind of impact the Columbian Exchange had on that continent. So, first, let's look at Europe. Europe had 36 million people. 700 years later, after the Columbian Exchange, they had 120 million people. All right? That's 3 or 4 times the original amount of people. They're becoming a bigger, stronger, more powerful society, okay? Let's look back at the Americas. They didn't just have foods to make them stronger, they also had diseases. And their population went from 39 million, which was larger than Europe, to 13 million, a third of what it used to be. So Europe is becoming bigger and stronger. The Americas are becoming weaker. All right. And the Columbian Exchange is what helps us understand this. Now, I want to say for a second that personally, why I think this is so important is because if you don't have historical reasons to explain why things turned out the way they did, then sometimes you fall back on racist reasons. So some people might say that the reason that Native Americans are no longer as powerful as they used to be is because they weren't as smart or strong as the Europeans. It's because they were lazy. It's because they were weak. It's because they weren't smart enough. But we know by looking at this exchange of foods and diseases that that's not the reason that the Native Americans ended up being defeated and the Europeans were so successful. Okay? We have historical reasons to explain that. So we don't go back on things like racism and other not very good explanations for why the world is the way it is. Okay? Essential questions you should be asking as you look through your documents and your materials for today. How were Native Americans impacted? How were Europeans impacted? Who do you think was impacted more? Okay. I also want you to think about those impacts. Were they good or bad, right? Was it a positive change or a negative change? Okay. Go through your materials. I want you to take this Columbian Exchange very seriously. Again, as somebody who studies history, it's one of the most important events in history. Okay. It's very important.